Good evening. Welcome to the Clark Road Barn Advisory Committee. This is the first meeting of this advisory committee group, and we're here on May 15th. I'd like to welcome everyone here in the room and anyone who might be watching this at a later date. I'm Kerri Ivers. I'm the Director of Developmental Services, and happy to be here in the room with this group. So I think what we can do is maybe go around the room, and if you just want to introduce yourself, and if you're a citizen representative, you can indicate that, and if you're a department liaison, you can indicate that as well.
I'm Tom Combs. I chair the Historic Preservation Board in Penfield, a longtime resident.
And just a note, there are some of you might have to share a mic, so you might have to spread a mic around just so everyone can speak into one.
Okay, I'm Mike Heath, resident of Penfield, so here in that capacity.
I'm Kartik. I'm the chair for the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee.
I'm Mindy MacLaren. I've lived in Penfield for 13 years.
My name is Shannon Barg. I am a building inspector for the town of Penfield and the liaison to the Historic Preservation Board.
Amy Owens, Town of Penfield Engineering Department.
Chuck Fox, a Penfield resident.
Bob Keiffer, Penfield resident.
Mike Mathews, Penfield citizen.
Mike Jarvis, Penfield resident.
Michael Quinn, Penfield resident.
Andrew Fitz, liaison from the Rec Department.
Tim Masterton, Penfield Parks foreman.
And then I'm going to acknowledge in the back, because there's no mics over there, Candace Lee, town council person, who is one of the liaisons to this group. So I thought what we could do is I'd be happy to share for everyone, if we would, in school fashion, take one and pass it down to your neighbor. The agenda for this evening. And I'll wait till everybody gets there. So we've sort of already checked off item number 1 on the agenda, which is welcome and introductions. Then we're going to take a look at this committee's scope and roles and responsibilities. And then I thought we could move on from there to talk about potential alternatives that could be explored by this group. And those are just a list of potential ones. This committee can determine if those need to change, or what we might need to talk about. And then talk about some evaluation criteria. Let's agree up front, sort of what we're going to look at as potential options, how we might evaluate them, and then as a sort of a practice of how we're going to get from here, where we are at the very start, to the end, which is a recommendation to the town board, typically in the format of a memo or some type of a written report. And that written document is something that town staff will help craft based on everyone's input and guidance. And then I think what we can look at is what information we might need to gather between now and the next time we meet. And then I'd like to leave this meeting with the next several meeting dates set aside, since we're all in the room together. It saves us having to do a terrible doodle poll. And so I thought if we could, we have meeting date options that are available for this room and with PCTV, so we can work at filling a couple of those in over the next couple of months. That would be ideal. So there we are. So moving on to item number 2 on the agenda, I thought we could make sure we all know what we're here to do and how we're going to get there. So the scope of this committee is to review the conditions, explore alternatives, evaluate impacts associated with possible actions related to the Clark Road Barn. In other words, give some guidance. We're going to take a look at some things and then make a suggestion to the town board based on that review. We're going to make that recommendation regarding the preferred alternative for the barn and provide the information and potential resources that support the advisory committee's recommendation. Roles and responsibilities. I know there are lots of committees convened, for lots of different reasons, but I think it's always good to have sort of a touch point for how we all are going to convene and interact with one another. I think these are pretty basic ones, but it's always good to go over them. I think the expectation is that we're all going to participate actively and civilly. I think that's always important. We may not always have the same ideas or same perspective, but we're going to have conversation in a way that's respectful of one another at all times. And I think this group is going to be really good at doing that. I think it's important anytime you're doing an exploration of options that everyone keeps an open mind. So people come in with maybe ideas or perspective and be open to hearing new ideas and different perspectives. That you'll share insights and information related to this scope. We'll give everyone a chance to be heard. So that's always an important part of a committee's efforts. We'll consider opportunities for compromise if those are available to the group. And I think it's really important for a project like this to understand that although 100% agreement might be desired, it may not be feasible. And so we have to determine whether or not it's going to be sort of a majority rule type of situation. We might find ourselves in a situation where votes are needed in order to make a decision and move forward. That's just the reality for a project of this nature. Anytime you're looking at any type of an issue that has multiple possible options, we might not be able to please all of the people all of the time. So I think that's just a good framework to start with. I feel like I'm doing a lot of talking, so I'm going to pause for a quick second and just check in with everyone. Anything I've said so far seem not right or off base or any concerns? Okay, it's also a good way for me to test, make sure everybody's listening. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. It's early enough in the evening that that's not a problem. Later on, that gets to be touch and go. All right, so in preparing for this, group to gather, staff pulled together some potential alternatives to consider. And so we can review those as a group and then decide if any should be changed. Are we missing one? And the idea is we can't evaluate endless ideas. We've got to sort of narrow down to what could be done with the barn. And remembering that this group was started and on the table at the time was demolition. So that's one of the options that's still on the table. We couldn't take it off, but we've added several others onto the table. So I'm going to put them on the up on the board or up on the screen, and we can read through them and then sort of think about them for a minute, ask questions, and go from there. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed a slide. Process overview. So we are here, we're at this first meeting. We're the basic steps that we envision for this group is to identify the potential alternatives and evaluation criteria. That's on the agenda for tonight. We're gonna gather information related to the proposed alternatives, costs, funding, opportunities, organizations, any other types of information we think might be needed in order to make some decisions. Then we can evaluate the alternatives based on the agreed upon criteria. And then ultimately, the next and final step is making a recommendation to the town board in writing. Staff support will be provided for that. So possible alternatives. These are in no particular order. I have to say that. They're here, and you have to put them in order to read them. So. Alternative 1, town rehabilitates the structure's exterior foundation and interior to be used as a conditioned occupiable space. All requirements for public assembly in an enclosed permanent structure would need to be met. And when we say requirements, we mean New York State building code and energy and all that encompasses. It's not just the building code, it's the energy code and anything else that might apply to rehabilitation of a structure like this. Alternative 2 is the town restores the structure's exterior, foundation, and rehabilitates the interior to be used on a temporary or seasonal basis. And I'm give us just as an example, like a farmer's market. So there's no permanent occupancy, it's seasonal in nature. Alternative 3, the town restores the structure's exterior and foundation to ensure safety with no occupancy of the building permitted. So no really, besides structural shoring up, there'd be no interior finishing of the structure, just exterior and foundational only. Alternative 4 is the town subdivides the parcel and issues an RFP for the sale and/or transfer of the barn and the immediate surrounding parcel, that portion south of Clark Road. The RFP could specify preservation and restoration of the building on or off, I'm sorry, my Long Island was showing for a moment. I was about to say off. That's not how we say it up here. On or off the current site. And then alternative 5 would be careful demolition of the current structure with salvaged beams and other building materials repurposed on other town projects or off-site. So I guess the first question I have is, does anybody see something that's like blatantly missing from the list of alternatives to consider?
I would think our first move would be to see a place.
Oh, we need a mic there.
We could, thanks. If you could arrange that so we could get inside and look around. It's been a long time since I've been in there.
We're going to talk about.
It's hard to make these alternatives until you see it.
So I think we're definitely going to put that on the table. I did check with Eric Tate to make sure that it was reasonable for us to suggest that an on-site visit could happen. We're going to have to do so carefully, and how people enter the building and where people can go inside the building is going to be carefully controlled when we set that up. I think for this, the purpose of today, we're just trying to decide what options should we be exploring as a group. Is this set of options sufficient? Because can you think of anything else with the building? You're either keeping the building and doing some level of renovation. So we've got 3 of options here. You're conveying the building and the property to someone else, and it's somebody else's task to take care of it, or the town is going to look at demolishing the building. So those are can we think of other things that might need to, without thinking at all about programming of it at this point? We're not.
I just think it'd be somewhat challenging for the group to figure that out without seeing it.
Does everybody else feel the same way, or any similar thoughts about that?
Well, I think so, but you're just presenting some possible alternatives right now, right? We're not trying to decide an alternative.
We're not trying to, we're not even going to talk about these alternatives really in detail.
It seems like with 4 and 5, 4 is selling the property and then, something with the barn, selling the barn, but I don't know if the barn, if those have to be tied together.
So say that one more time.
The barn may be sold if somebody wanted it as an option possibly, but does that mean that you sell the land too?
No, so that's a good point. If you wanted, the town could issue an RFP that it just to sell the structure and have the structure relocated, you mean?
I'm just wondering if it makes sense to separate that out or have that.
We certainly can, we can certainly do that.
To look at. I'm not saying that's the right thing. I'm just thinking that might be an alternative to consider.
I'd just like to stop for a second and introduce Matt from planning. He doesn't have a mic in front of him yet. He can get one. There's one floating around. And to thank him for the card tents. And I do apologize that we will have these better squared away and ready for you. All right, so that's one note would be to separate out item alternative 4 about whether it's, and maybe it's not even, we're going to be adding a 6th alternative. 4 would be sort of divided. We can separate out the sale of the actual barn itself. Sale or conveyance. I'll use the word conveyance. It might not be a sale. It might be, for the sum of $1, an organization decides to take the barn and relocate it. Any other thoughts or ideas?
Well, it seems to me that there could be an A and a B to number 5. The demolition without, it's just a total demolition. And it's hard to think about this without knowing the cost, but it could be significantly less expensive to demolish it and not try to save pieces of it.
Okay.
We don't know if it's worth saving, actually.
Okay. All right, so that's a good distinction. So with or without, it could be demolition with or without salvage as a
Yes.
sort of a breakout. Does that seem fair to everyone? I'll just look for nodding heads, and you can vehemently shake your head no if.
Can I also add that even if we wanted to safely demolish?
Thanks, please.
Oh, we might need that portable mic.
I will move. Now that it looks like there is an empty chair, I'll move. I wanted to note that even if we ultimately decided with alternative 5 with the careful demolition to salvage, it could be possible that we go and demolish and then couldn't salvage. So I didn't want to discourage the committee that if we went with that path and then comes to find out that it ends up being a total demolition, it wasn't a failure on either part. It just happens to be that the facts didn't line up at the time of demolition.
Sure, that's a good distinction. So sometimes well, there's an expression about what good intentions, what path it lines. So sometimes with the best intention, in functional carrying out of a task may not be viable. All right, so I see those tweaked alternatives.
Yeah. Hey, Kerri?
Yes.
One quick thought, too, is I don't know if people are aware, but the barn could be dismantled because it's all post and beam. So you take it apart, and it could be relocated on the site and put back together. And the timbers that are affected can be replaced or repaired.
Okay, so would we want to consider that as another alternative, or we want to have that be part of? So that would be something we'd need more information about to understand what the cost of that potential would be, correct? That seems fair?
Yeah, I mean, the demolition to me is a non-starter. It has no logic because there's an aftermarket for that frame. If the town doesn't want it, it can be dismantled and sold, or it can be dismantled and put up somewhere else on the site.
Okay,
So
I
it's
think
kind of
that
an investment.
one of the things I want to maybe share as a thought here is that, especially early on in the sort of brainstorming phase of this project, I think we should adopt there are no bad ideas. We're just gathering input and information. And then when we get to that alternative analysis and the evaluation, that's really where we can sort of get into the weeds on, do we think this is a good idea, a bad idea? What's the value? Pros and cons. So up front, I think it's really important for us to keep all the options on the table. We've actually expanded a couple here and added a few, which I think is good. And then let's save I think it's important to save the non-starter conversation for when we get a little bit further down the line, just because we don't know what the information will bear out for everyone. All right, so any other alternatives that we didn't talk about that we think we need to think about?
The other idea that's similar is the oldest house moving company in the country is in Rochester, Mathews Movers, and it would be very easy to move that building to another part of the site, depending on how structurally intact it is.
Okay.
So that's a simple exercise. There's no obstructions. There's no utility lines. You lift it, you move it, you set it on a new foundation.
Okay.
So it's somewhat of a different alternative.
Okay. I think what we might do is when we talk about the relocation, that could be, relocation of the barn could be its own category potentially, and then we have the various, whether it's deconstruction and then relocating it or pick it up and move it. We can break that one down that way. And I think we'll have to gather some information that documents sort of what that process looks like, how, and
cost
and other evaluation criteria. And Matt, I don't mean to ping you with another thing, but would you mind just making sure that you're capturing these in the notes, because I'm not documenting them.
This is recorded, right?
It is, yes. Yeah. You'll be able to watch this later. Okay. All right. Anything else? No?
Just a clarifying question. The way you described alternative 4 is selling or leasing the barn to another entity, and that could include them, if they purchase the barn, taking it away and reselling it or whatever?
So that would be one of the, we would look at that as whether or not, I guess at this point, we could structure any way we wanted to, if it's something that this committee wanted to look at as an option. What we were thinking about was whether or not it could either be used in place but owned by someone else, or it could be purchased, the barn structure itself could be purchased as a structure with no change in the underlying land ownership and be taken off site. So those are two separate things. Either we're conveying that piece of land with the barn and somebody can use it there in that location or do whatever they will with it. And then, or we could just look to potentially sell the barn structure itself and somebody takes it away as if, they bought a car from the town. It's just, they're not as simple to move, but that idea where the land isn't changing ownership, but the built structure is being taken away.
I could see that, I guess, a subcategory whereby the land surrounding the barn and the barn itself is leased for a 20 or 50-year period, perhaps for $1. But then the barn should be required to stay in place, and the leasee could develop it commercially or.
So those are some of the things that we would look at as when we're evaluating alternatives. That could be what we look at as well. Candace, did you have a thought?
I was thinking that would be captured by the and/or transfer.
Okay.
Right. And I think the other thing we have to look at here, and we'll certainly, as we go along, questions that come up, we have the ability to put those questions to the town attorney, because some things may present legal issues, concerns. This particular piece of property is owned outright by the town, so there's a little bit less issue there. I mean, the fact we can even have this conversation about this barn is based on the fact that it's not part of the bonded property, in which case we wouldn't be able to even have that as an option. So we can look further at that and identify any either opportunities or potential obstacles with the range of those ideas in there. All right, do we think we're ready to think about evaluation criteria? Do we think we can move on? Okay. So again, just as a conversation starter, we put together some bullets of some ideas of things that we might use to evaluate the various concepts or various alternatives. Public benefit to Penfield residents and community members, town use and benefit, initial costs needed to move ahead with the proposed action, long-term costs associated with operations and maintenance, as well as staff resources, if needed, associated with the proposed action, the proposed timeline from initiation to completion, impact on other identified facilities, improvements, and needs. So I think that, I think the town board, it's not just about cost. I think there's other issues and factors to think about. Are there other criteria? And when we look at these criteria, I can envision a variety of ways of using them to rate, I guess that's the best way, each of the alternatives. It could be a ranking system. It could be on a scale of 1 to 10. It could be on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being low and 5 being.
Yeah, I think there should be some kind of ranking system with a number attached to it.
And that's probably the easiest. So a numbered, where for public benefit, alternative, an X, is a 4 for me, and everybody would have a chance to vote. We can talk as we get further down the line whether or not it should be anonymous voting. Is it everybody shares their answers, so we all come to the table and speak freely and share our thoughts and feelings. So we're going to have some more conversations around the how we rate these criteria. I just want to see if the list of criteria is adequate, if we need something else in here that we didn't think about.
There's no mention of historic and cultural importance, the heritage element of this. How many barns do we have in Penfield? How many barns are more than 150 years old? This could be a very rare building and therefore significant on those merits alone, besides the sort of use and maintenance and that side of things.
Okay.
It's a non-renewable resource, and there aren't very many of these out there, and that should weigh heavily on the decision too.
But from the way I understand it, this is for the alternatives, right? That is a fact, like the historic value. That doesn't change with the alternatives, does it?
It's a criteria.
I would say as part of the criteria saying how well are we preserving the history of it with the action that is chosen. I think that's maybe a better way to define it. That could be ranked. How well are we preserving the history of the barn with the changes that are being proposed?
Okay.
Does that sound appropriate?
Yeah, that could be an appropriate criteria to add for sure. I think as we get further down the line as well, we can decide that it might be easiest to then just have a straight ranking, a straight weight. In other words, all the criteria have the same weight. We're not weighting one criteria more than other, because that we could probably get into a whole debate just on that of like, well, no, it should be 50% of the score or it should be 30% of the score. So we might look at adding that as a criteria and then having all of these sort of have the same weight in terms of the scoring, potentially.
I think a rubric would be helpful for sure.
Okay.
Even if it's like 1 to 5, so that all of our 4s would mean the same thing for a certain criteria. So
okay, interesting.
Would be useful.
That's a really great idea. I love a good rubric. It makes me think about my kids in elementary school. And but yes, a rubric would be fantastic. I think we can certainly work on that so that we have this. We're all sort of operating from the same understanding of what a 4 is versus a 1.
Yes.
Okay. Thoughts?
I think we should consider the possibility that the preferred alternative makes it eligible for alternative.
Oh, I'm sorry, Bob. Could you slide up closer to the mic?
I think that we should consider whether the preferred alternative qualifies the project for alternative funding.
Okay.
The state has had a program for years where they funded the preservation of barns in the Adirondack Preserve and other places. So there may be other organizations or other government agencies that put money into certain alternatives that they prefer.
Okay, that's good information. I wonder if that would be captured as part of the evaluation of the initial cost, because it would be captured as an offset. In other words, the project's going to cost $100,000, but we can get $10,000 in grant funding. Do you know what I mean? So that would impact the cost, or do you think that should be a standalone? And I'm just asking the question, I guess, does a group think that should be a standalone consideration? So I guess I'd point out, like, so say, for example, there is a grant available, and the grant's worth $20,000, and the range of costs of the value of the opportunities or alternatives, is $1 million. Well, the $20,000 doesn't really change the bottom line financially or fiscally. So that's my question. How and where should we capture that ability or availability of funding?
Well, you're not going to be able to do that just knowing what grants are out there. You don't know if you would be chosen to receive the grant, so it's hard to evaluate that.
Right.
I think that exploration of alternative funding should be an item.
Yes. Okay. Do we want to add it in?
Maybe there's funding available for tearing it down. Maybe there's funding available for converting it to a athletic.
So I wonder if that's more of maybe that might be information we want to gather and have available as like with each of the alternatives if funding is available? If so, here are the sources. This way, that's information that's presented and provided, but it's maybe, I don't know if you could rank it as a 1 to a 5. Like, I mean, we could look at it. We can look at it.
Kerri, I will say that I've already reached out to the Landmark Society and gotten a lot of that information, so I do have that.
Okay.
Not with me, but I have already talked to them directly about what kind of grants and programs there are for preservation focused, because the original scope was that way before we did any of this. So I can reach out to them again and ask for more information if they have anything further, but obviously they'll have mostly preservation related items.
And I also will share that we have we have secured 2 subject matter experts to come and join us. We didn't think it was necessary at this very beginning meeting because it's just housekeeping and just sort of getting the group up and running. But Caitlin Ivers, and I've asked her for this pronunciation because I've said it 4 different ways and never was right. But she's with the Landmark Society. She will be attending future meetings. I've got her availability so that when we get to that stage of the meeting where we're talking about next dates, I will have a little cheat sheet with me to make sure we pick a date where she's available. And we also have Sarah Hall, who is an architect, and she did her thesis was related to historic barns. I think specifically relocating them was a lot of her work. So she'll have, I think, some interesting insight with respect to that aspect of potential alternatives, and just in general, her historic preservation, sort of experience and mindset. So those are the 2 subject matter experts we've, to the extent that we might have questions that are beyond the scope of our collective abilities to answer. In other words, none of us are structural engineers, so there's going to be some questions we can't answer, and the town board would have to spend money to answer. So I wouldn't, but we can cross that bridge when we get to it. So I'm hearing the availability, maybe it's availability and the extent of grant funding. We'll play around with that. I'm thinking ahead to the rubric I've got to develop and figure out the best way to sort of capture that. But we'll play around with that, and we'll bring that to the group for additional sort of fleshing out as we go along. Any other evaluation criteria that we feel like we need to add to the list?
I guess I just wanted to, differentiate in terms of the historic and cultural significance. One evaluation criteria would be physically examining with expert help to realize how well preserved, how much original old material there is in the barn, hopefully also to date when the barn was constructed. But then the second criteria is, again, looking at the Penfield farming community and the survival of old buildings as a whole. Is this, one of only 2 barns, or is it a fairly typical one? So there's the structure itself, and then there is the significance of its uniqueness, I suppose.
Right, I think. Right, I think that's going to be a point, though. Once we answer that question, I think then we have that information. So that could be an early. I feel like I understand exactly where you're coming from. And I think that's good information to have, to say, is this one of many or is this one of a few? So we have some sense of impact one way or the other. Does that make sense? So we can certainly do some research on our end. Thankfully, I've got a representative from the building department who will have access. And, we might not have perfect records, though, because many of the older barns would not have been subject to a building permit. So we might be using, some aerial imagery. Maybe Matt and Amy will be doing a little driving tour of the towns, and we can sort of inventory barns. And, the other thing that we haven't done is anybody in the room, and forgive me for not knowing this, does anybody anybody have a barn on their property? I know at least one of us does, not me.
We do have a barn on our property.
Okay. Anybody else have a barn on their property?
My parents have a barn in the village of Webster that's built in 1860.
Okay.
How big is a barn?
Well, that's a great, that is a good question. I wonder if we're going to do this sort of exercise of comparison, I think it would have to be comparable in size to the Clark Road barn. So I can get dimensions on that.
Kerri, just a comment. Years ago, the Boy Scouts did an inventory of the entire town, and I'm going to forget the number. You guys maybe even might have been involved in this. The number was in the hundreds of barns that are in the town of Penfield, and I won't say what's in my memory because it seems like too high a number, but there were literally hundreds of barns. We probably lost a few in the last couple of decades, but there's a lot of barns out there.
All right, go ahead, I'm sorry, Candace.
Can we get some more clarity on the difference between the first and second of what the public benefit and how that's going to be defined versus town benefit? And then same for proposed timeline and impact. And I'm trying to understand how these will be scored and so that the board can interpret the results that honors the intent of this committee. So I don't know if we have details on
So no, I think we're going to talk about that. I think if in several of the alternatives, the barn would continue to be town-owned and operated, and so then the question would become, how is it being used, by what department, how is it, what's the benefit, what are we providing, what service or amenities are being provided if it's occupied building, right? And this is where I'm going to ask maybe Andy to jump in. So there might be that might be more of a town staff or town board more than this, because this is going to be ultimately, can it be used or can it be used in the scenario? Does that help or hurt the town deliver services? So I think when we're thinking about the scenarios, if we preserve it with the intent of having it be occupiable space, there's going to be a cost to that, and then seemingly there'd be some intended user of the building if you're going to go to the effort of making it occupiable building space.
So, go ahead.
No, yours.
So I understood town use in the context of the alternatives posed, but I understood town benefit more along the line of the historical benefit or cultural benefit or these non-tangible benefits. Sure. So I think it might be helpful to have a description outlined with each criteria so that when it's scored with everybody thinking the same thing so that it's fairly applied. And I don't, the last couple bullet points, I'm not sure how you would be scoring it. Are you saying that a 5, making this up, is most desirable? So would the proposed timeline be a project that takes 3 months is going to be scored very highly versus something that would take 18 months? This committee would rank that lower, or the impact on other identified facilities. Does this mean, for example, if it's used as a farmer's market, we're going to rank this lower because it maybe duplicates other recreational facilities? I'm trying to understand what these actually mean.
This is all good conversation. I think we might be looking at sort of honing this. Again, this was provided as a conversation starter.
Yeah. No, I'm not dumping on you. I'm saying these are things that I kind of want to hear feedback from the committee to help at least frame our minds, and.
Well, I think it's also, there's an opportunity here to sort of figure out, when we are sort of evaluating the alternatives, does having a town use matter? If there's no identifiable use of a building, is that going to be an issue or a concern for this committee and then for the town board? Or if the use is somewhat limited, does that help? Does that direct sort of which of the alternatives jumps to the forefront? I don't know. And I guess I wanted to get some feedback from the entire group about sort of what the thought process is. For the time, I don't know that could be taken out as a criteria. the time could be what the time is. But for example, if there was an alternative that you're like, oh yes, in order to, get the funding or to do the things that are needed to achieve an alternative whatever, that's going to be a 3-year process. Does that matter? Maybe it doesn't. So I didn't know if length of time was a factor that anybody cared about. It may not be.
I think length of time is going to be something we have to consider because of the state of the barn. If we wait 3 years to do anything, it's going to fall down, kind of a thing. So I think maybe that will come with a structural analysis of how long do we have before we have to make a decision, because how long do we have that the barn's going to be standing there? I mean, that's not a perfect science, but at least give us a better idea of how much time the committee has to decide on a project, how long we have to do something with it.
Okay. I'm wondering if so maybe it's more of an issue of if we have some under/over where if the project we think is going to exceed, we say 2 years, because I'm thinking in terms of construction cycles. So 2 years is, if we say it's more than 2 years, and that's maybe a mark against it, or it's under, but if it's under 2 years, then they're all given the same score type of a thing. So the more, who was it that said the rubric? Was it?
So
I think the more we talk about it, the more important that's going to be.
So Candace breaking down some of those things is helpful, because I think similar to talking about the possible alternatives where under each hypothetical there are sub-hypotheticals, I think it's important to establish for some of these criteria that it could have different metrics. And so when we're talking about public benefit, we could talk about, the historic value, like continuing that being a metric with the option. Members of the community using the structure being a metric. But if there are metrics like in the criteria that have to be very structured, like the timeline, then we just establish, like if it's a 1-year benchmark, does this alternative go over the benchmark, or does it work with the benchmark set? And so I think we'd have to dig a little bit deeper into these criteria and establish subcategories for some of them.
Okay.
And then decide what you can quantify and what you probably can't quantify.
Okay. I think that's a fair point. So what we can do is we can work on sort of establishing rubric for these that'll help understand sort of what's quantifiable, what isn't. And if it's coming through this is really difficult to sort of try to describe how you would rank it or score it, then we can come back to this group to say, okay, how should we handle this? We want to understand this as an issue, but how do we figure out how to decide whether it's a pro or a con? And I think, that's the other thing that we could look at. We're talking about doing like a number-based scale, but do we want to look at maybe doing an evaluation that's you mark something as a pro or you mark it as a con, depending on what it's. No.
Sorry, do you mind if I interrupt?
No.
Who of our staff is going to be project managing this? You. Okay, Kerri. Okay, so I'm happy to work with you, but this is just a proposal to the group, and then of course, if it's helpful or not helpful, but I think we need to treat the alternatives, or we, the board, would want to treat the analysis process more like an RFP. So if we have each of the alternatives as a potential vendor or an idea, right? And I would be asking that everyone score it, not pro or con, but score it 1 to 5, and then the committee can decide what each 1 through 5 means, right? Favorable, unfavorable, yes, no, maybe, whatever, right? But I would be asking that we trend the results so that the board can see not just the overall committee recommendation, but I'd like to kind of break it out by
how you got there.
What did Mike say? What did Strees say? What did Mindy say? So that I can kind of see that alternative 1 was clearly the majority, or alternative 1 won by 1 vote. And that vote was, of the 6 alternatives, barely made it to 1. So I kind of want to see the trend across the group individually, so that we can really analyze that data in context of, so that it's not just, reconstruct and relocate elsewhere, but kind of to really understand the work product over the months and the discussion. So I think that would be helpful. Just again, just a suggestion. I know that
that's
more work on the project manager, but
no, that's more than fair, and I think it's actually helps to build sort of build the story of how you got from here to whatever the conclusion and the recommendation is. If you just only present the recommendation with no context, it doesn't really help anyone. I think it's important for context purposes to sort of
and I
explain.
think if it's in a spreadsheet, then I can pull out how heavy was historical benefit to the entire committee. Then I can extract that data and trend it, right?
Right.
Versus
yes or no, pros or cons. Yes, right. Understood. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I was coming into this thinking that ranking is the best case scenario. Anytime I've ever worked on a reviewing committee for any topic whatsoever, there was always a numeric scaling ranking system. So I think it would work well here. We have to just figure out a couple of them, how to sort of capture it.
Yeah, and again, I'm happy to work with you on developing that.
I will take you up on that.
As a kindness to the building department, I think we ought to restrict the list of barns to something that's 75 years or older. There's lots of modern pole barns that are a certain size, but that's not the topic.
That's a fair point, and I don't know if we can figure out if someone in the history banks has the. I'm hoping that there's whatever list was assembled by the valiant Eagle Scouts a few decades ago can be.
It should be around. Yeah.
You know what? I'm going to call my friend Jim Costello, who knows everything, and he might even be in my office because most of his files are still there. So.
And Kathy Knauer might know too.
Okay. Yeah. Between the two of them, hopefully we'll be able to find that. That would be a good starting point.
Just if you're going to work with the data, I think the town has a GIS master system.
We do.
It would be good to also just spatially, if you have the list of addresses, to look at the distribution too, because we might have a lot of old barns, but they're up in the northwest corner, for instance, and Clark Barn might be quite distinctive, surviving where it does.
Are there like any reports, or wasn't the barn looked at maybe in December by an engineer? Do we get to see what the results of those?
I do. We do have that. What I was going to share with you is I have created a Google folder that I can share out to this group. So if with that link, you should be able to get into the document, to the file documents, if you are comfortable accessing Google Docs. I can also provide that out to the email as well. Again, it was I'll happy to share it. And then if we have further conversations or questions, I just don't want to say I can answer them because I'm not the structural engineer, but I'm happy to share the information. And we're going to talk a little bit more about some of those things, because I think, and maybe I'm going to skip to the next slide. Okay. So I think we're at the stage where we want to identify sort of information and resources that we need before the next meeting. We're going to refine the list of alternatives. We're going to refine and develop a rubric for the evaluation criteria to share. We'll also share out the structural engineer's letter to the town board. If there's any other information, I think what we are going to do is set up a time to visit the barn. The preference would be to do that on a single, to the extent that we can. We're going to just try to pick a day that Eric Tate and whoever else he might need to have with him be there. In talking with Eric, we are going to have controlled entry into the building in terms of where it's safe to step and be inside, and we certainly can't have this group walking in all at once. It wouldn't be a safe situation.
Yeah, I think the last time we opened up the barn before the floor collapsed, I think, Shannon was there, also there. I didn't feel comfortable going on it then, and then about a week and a half later, the floor collapsed. So we can open up the barn doors as wide as we can, and you can see pretty much the whole
thing
without walking around.
Yeah, we're going to be so limited access, but certainly internal view. I will also share with you that the staff at PCTV have already done exterior drone flyover. Interior drone is scheduled in the next couple of weeks, and they are looking at also doing 3D imaging of the building. So that is underway by town staff. So when we have that ready.
Yeah, I've already done the exterior, really high quality 3D, and I was going to hand some out that people could take a look. You can just go on your computer at home and look at it all and fly around in 3D. And I was going to offer to do something, but if you're set to do the interior, that's good.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the offer. Town staff has the technology and the ability, so for our benefit and sake, it's helpful for us to do the work, and certainly also from an access standpoint, liability and risk, we want town employees is best.
Mike Heath had actually shared some of those with the town previously. May I please ask that they be shared with the committee in the shared folders, because I thought they were excellent.
Okay, yeah.
And there was also an April engineering report and further details for the Clark barn that's much more comprehensive than the one we received in December.
Okay, yep, I'll make sure both are in there.
In April?
What you put a name on it. Who's
There was, I'm not going to remember the name of the engineer, I'm sorry. There was a more detailed engineering report that included the history of the barn and such that was provided to the town in April. That was much more comprehensive than the opinion letter we received in December. So out of fairness, I just want the committee to have whatever the board has for full consideration and discussion.
We'll make sure that gets shared out as well. For the barn, we can either set up a weeknight similar to like this meeting where now that the town hall ends at 4:30, it could be at 4:30, it could be at this time if this works better for everyone's personal schedule at 5:30. We could do it on a Saturday morning if that was easier or better for folks. Any thoughts about a time and day? Weeknight would be better, honestly, for staff consideration for that purpose. I'm not trying to ruin anybody's weekend. Could we pick a weeknight, a Monday or a Tuesday?
Yeah, I'd say a Monday just to keep in line with our meetings if we're going to continue with Monday nights.
Right, so what I'll do is I'll coordinate with staff to see availability, and if you can all just mentally stay, or maybe in a couple, 2-3 weeks, we obviously want to avoid, we've got Memorial Day coming up, so maybe it'll be the following week, we'll set aside a Monday to do the visual, and what we could do is, or we could combine it with our next meeting, and we just meet at the barn for everybody to get a peek look through, and then come back here to continue the meeting, sort of fresh off the look-see at the barn. Would that be, or like, is it too much of a pain to be like field tripping and then coming to have a meeting? Field trip and then meeting? I feel like sometimes having the conversation immediately after seeing it might be, while it's fresh in everyone's minds.
Maybe like a 5 o'clock meet before we would meet at 5:30, and not that a half an hour might do justice to seeing it, but enough time if whoever wants to go see it can go, and then still meet here
it wouldn't
at
have to be
5:30.
mandatory. It would be available to go look if you needed to go look or wanted to go look, and then we'll meet here at 5:30. So we'll tie that into the next meeting that we set. I'm trying to think of other information that we'll be sharing with you as more information or data becomes available, like the drone materials. I'll share that with the group as well. And then
the rubric.
The rubric, yes, I'll be sharing that as well. So
and Bob, it was Barrow Architecture.
So I wanted to also, so I did, So if we're looking at, and forgive me, I've got the dates where this room is available. And I'm just trying to tie them up to see which one is a Monday. And that's the other challenge. So we picked this day because, quite honestly, it was one of the very few that was available in May. We have many meetings that are standing meetings that are happening in this room and/or offsite meetings that PCTV is tasked with broadcasting or recording. And so I'm having to combine this room's availability with PCTV's availability. And so then the availability of dates really does dwindle. So the next meetings dates in June I've got Tuesday, June 6th, Wednesday, June 14th, or Wednesday or Thursday, June 28th or 29th. So I would say the 6th or the 14th to me would be preferential if that works for as many people as possible, just because I don't want to lose too much time in between meetings, but give us enough time to do the things we said we were going to do. So there's, but either one of those, the 6th or the 14th.
One of those is not a Monday.
It's not a Monday.
The 14th is a Wednesday.
The 6th was a Tuesday, the 14th was a Wednesday, and unfortunately, even though this Monday worked out nicely for PCTV and auditorium, I'm not seeing a Monday in the foreseeable future, not until we get to July. July and August will have Monday availability again. So if we could pick the next June meeting, I'll move on to share with you the July and August options that we have that would land back on a Monday. Does anybody have a preference between the 6th and the 14th? Show of the hands who can't do June 6th. Okay, that's no good. Show of hands who can't do June 14th. Oh, goodness heaven.
Sorry, I'll be on my honeymoon.
Oh, that's okay. Well, now.
So I'm going to be gone those. I'll be gone those 2 weeks.
Had to put that in there, nice.
Okay.
So don't plan on me at all those 2 weeks.
So going to June 28th.
I don't know if you're going to get 100% attendance.
Yeah.
Kerri.
Okay,
I think you just schedule it. And
Okay, I think that's what we're going to have to do. And then, Shannon, what we might have to do is, if we do plan it for a night where you're not here, my plan would be that this next meeting, we would have our 2 subject matter experts. So I'll be comparing back to their availability. So what I'll try to do is put the dates out there to hold them for everybody, and to the extent, and I'll check with PCTV, not that anyone would, you're exempt from what I'm about to say, but we may be able to set up a Zoom for anybody who couldn't be here physically, but could remote in, because I think, Michael, you're going to have some things that are taking you out of town for a period of time. But if the Zoom thing is an option, which I can't promise that it is, but if it is an option, we could always look at that as well, if that would help folks. All right.
I was going to ask if, when the barn walkthrough occurs,
yep,
if one or more people on the committee could just film it to document it for those of us who can't make that, and/or for the general public to see the inside. And I think I'd prefer like a video walkthrough,
right,
which actually is showing everything rather than select snapshots, which might either show the best or show the worst.
I also checked with PCTV. They may have already video documented the interior of the building. I don't know if they did or didn't. And if they did, we can figure out the best way to make that available for sure.
I like that for the public too, because whatever decision is ultimately made, I think it's important for people to really understand the shape that it's in.
Yeah, right now it's a bit of a, as you said, a black box. You know, we see the outside, and we've seen a few stills in a couple of reports about what may or may not be inside, but we really don't have a very good understanding of it. And I would also, I guess I think of the barn as 2 different areas. There's the bottom livestock area, and then there's the very large upper store area with the lofts. And both of those spaces, I guess.
Yeah, and we're
I
likely
would
not
like
going to be able to get
know about them.
inside the bottom.
Yeah, if you open the main doors, you can see essentially the upper half of the barn, but the lower portion is also important to consider or
Yeah, and I
evaluate.
don't know if we're going to have reasonable access visually to that.
I think you can see the bottom from the top with the big hole in the.
Are there?
There is an
doors
outer
at the
door, but
cellar
that is
level?
it's boarded up very well because of kids or whoever trying to get in. So we'd have to work on really hard at opening up the bottom.
Yeah, it was sealed pretty tight. It was an attractive nuisance for presumably, allegedly, teenagers having a fun place to hang out. All right, so we're going to put some dates on the calendar. I'll work with our subject matter expert for at least the next one for sure, to pick a date where they're available, and I did get their general availability. And then what we can do is I'll share that link with the Google Drive. We'll upload whatever information we have available currently to share. And then I also will put in there links to information that's out on the website, just easy links for everybody's convenient access. So you don't have to think about it. I can put that in the email, and I'll put it in the Google Drive as well. This way, if you ever forget where you're trying to find something, it's easier to get to it from a link than sometimes trying to search through the website, which has endless amounts of information and data. All right, and then are there any other things that we should talk about at this inaugural meeting that we have not talked about?
Is the town studying other areas within the Shadow Pines property? Is there other study groups considering
There's already a master
redevelopments or uses or
there's a master
long-term
plan.
goals?
I'll share that with. There's already a master plan in place that the town board adopted in 2020. The town board is currently working through that to determine some improvements to both a recreational area that was designed in the master plan, and then also they're looking at the Clark House as well.
Did that master plan mention the barn?
No. The barn was not examined or explored as part of it. It was noted in the plan, but it wasn't studied in detail or evaluated at the time. And I'm saying that very confidently, but I wasn't here when that was prepared, so I would want to fact check that myself. But I'm 99% sure it was just noted on the plan, but no programming.
At the meeting where it was discussed, I think one of the attendees mentioned that Pittsford had recently, dismantled a barn. And has the town, reached out to learn more about Pittsford's experience, the costs, the techniques, the expertise they enlisted?
No, I think that would be one of the tasks that we would take up as a sort of in the identifying information and resources that we need for the next meeting. Certainly, we can do that. We can contact our counterparts. Was it the village of Pittsford or the town of Pittsford? Do we know?
I believe it was the town.
The town. Okay.
I believe it was located in the village, but the town took care of it when I was working over in Pittsford.
Oh, okay.
Not that I know any of the details from the recreation side of it.
Right. But we can certainly get more information about that.
Yeah, I just think if, rather than reinvent a wheel or guess at things, if we can talk to municipalities who in the last 5 years or so have done this, then we can really get a clearer understanding of the costs, the timelines, the expertise involved,
right,
and the uses that they've put their barns to.
Yeah, we can certainly do that. The only thing I would caution you with, and I would caution all of us, is when examining the costs of anything, if it was more than 30 days ago, certainly within the last year, 2 years, 3 years, we've seen material and labor costs have quadrupled, and I'm being conservative when I say that they've skyrocketed. So. I'm having to cost estimate for a comfort facility, AKA a bathroom building at one of our parks for a grant, and the number I have to attach to it is beyond what anyone would expect a bathroom facility would cost. I mean, it's going to be a really nice bathroom, but it's still a bathroom, and it's going to, we have $800,000 is the estimate at this point.
Kerri, does this committee have a budget?
We don't have a budget at this point, so if there are studies or information that needs to be gathered that would cost money, that would be something I have to bring to the town board for approval.
Have they set our pay scale yet?
No, you know what? It's going to be about 5 smiles and 3 thank yous per meeting is what we've, no, I'm kidding. So we appreciate everybody's volunteer time. We are going to try to be efficient with your time. That's why, we want to do homework in between the meetings. If there's information that you as individuals, have gathered in your travels and things that you want us to be aware of, certainly feel free to share that with me. If there's information or documents that you've come across, happy to provide that. I think with respect to the, if I'm happy to be the conduit of information, if it's something that, we should talk about as a group, we can share it so that it can be available to the group.
Can I just ask if others have evaluation criteria to add or other thoughts to just send it to Kerri, please, before the next meeting so that the rubric that can be presented is more or less the final product?
Yeah, that'd be great. I would say, if we're not going to be meeting until sometime in June, if by the end of this month you had any additional thoughts that you wanted to share, certainly you could send them my way, and we'll make sure that we try to either they're reflected in the rubric or we address them at the next meeting.
Well, are there other pieces of information? I mean, so it's already some information that you have in the Google Drive, right? But are there other things that people think should be gathered before the next meeting?
That's if you guys think there's other things that we should gather for the next meeting. We're going to do the rubric. We're going to share whatever information we have as far as analysis that has been done for the barn. We can pull the information that Shannon gathered, and we'll probably organize it in such a way so that it's not just a dump of files. There'll be subfolders in there, so you can sort of get a guess as to where you might find something. Anything else? Well, it's a gorgeous Monday evening, so I feel like this might be seems like a good place to stop the next meeting or stop this meeting. We will send out notification as soon as a meeting date is finalized for the next 1 or 2 at least, just so we have them on the calendar.
So, and I will try to attend as many meetings, but I figured, in case you wanted to badmouth the town, I wanted to, for you to do it freely. So there might be a few that I missed. But just for calendaring purposes, are we going a full 2 hours for meeting holds, or is it 60-minute meetings, 75-minute meetings?
Yeah, I mean, we could look at doing, I can reduce the next one because we didn't, obviously, I always I'd rather plan more and then let you out early.
I know, but
than the other way around. But
people have to eat, Kerri.
Yes. So if we're doing this, does this time slot work for people? The 5:30, I know this worked best for the most people that responded to the survey. So we can do the 5:30 time, and we can say 5:30 to 7. If we don't need that time, we leave, and if we do need that time, we have it. Does that make sense?
Yep, sounds good.
Okay. All right, good. All right, well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Kerri.
All right.
Thank you, PCTV.
Thank you, PCTV.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.